Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This is a car that I've wanted to have available to actually make a video about for some time because they are just a really interesting car. I did a video a long time ago about a very faithful and regular customer of ours with a BMW E9 3-litre CSI, which in right-hand drive form is itself a very rare car. I think they made 220 odd manuals and about the same amount in automatics, very, very low production numbers. That is a different car, even though they look very similar to this, the BMW 3-litre CSL E9. In the UK, they imported 500 of these only for homologation reasons, because they wanted to go racing with them, BMW. And the CSL came out as a SL, in this case, Coupe Sport Leicht, lightweight, nothing to do with long wheelbase or anything like that, and they were lightweight. The doors, the bonnet and the boot lids are all aluminium. Also, the inner wings at the front, the body shell, some of the bulkhead, etc., are also thinner steel than the normal E9, the 3-litre CSI, its brother. And the result is the car is undoubtedly lighter. I think it's about 1,200 kilos. Which is roughly comparable to, I think, a Mini now, actually. As I say, they only made 500 of them, right-hand drive, and the reason for that was so that BMW, it was a minimum number that BMW needed to go racing. But by the time they came to the UK, because they were so ridiculously expensive, and more of that in a moment, BMW actually piled on some more goodies onto the car, which of course brought the weight back up a bit again. You ended up with what BMW called at the time the City Pack, which was front and rear bumpers, not like this car has got, but the rear bumper it has, electric windows, all of which add weight, more luxurious carpets, etc. But nevertheless, the CSL, even in UK City Pack trim, was still a very, very special car. And for its time, a fast car. For a 2+2, you can genuinely squeeze two adults in the back of this. But it's how they go that matters. This car, it is a genuine, it's one of the 500. It didn't start life in this form. It started life as a standard CSL, and they made the CSLs in some amazing colours. This is Chamonix white, originally tiger green. They made Pillarless silver, thank you very much, probably almost inevitably named after a missile, and how appropriate. But this car has undergone a total restoration. It's been repainted in Chamonix white with the Motorsport stripes on it, and this car was actually the first Motorsport BMW. And how? Out of 7 years in the 1970s, it set I think Niki Lauda set the lap record for the Nürburgring, round about 8 minutes 12 seconds in a CSL. But that was what's called a Batmobile. That is to say, that was coined by BMW enthusiasts, and eventually BMW, with very little reluctance, took it on as the byword for this car with the body kit on it. This very deep front air dam, and this huge rear spoiler and roof deflector here. And the reason BMW fitted these was to increase downforce, and it did, to the extent that apparently, so it's said, these addenda on the car reduced the lap time around the Nürburgring of 9 seconds. So quite a bit of difference. And it also has these very interesting air deflectors on the top of the front wings. And I mean, how often do you see that on cars, really? They're supposedly for stability in corners. That's one reason. And the other one, which is slightly less credible, but scans well, could be true, is because these cars were so airborne so regularly when they were competing against Capri RS 3100s, I think it was, and actually wiping the floor with them a lot of the time as well. When they were airborne, it helped them to keep stable. I don't know how true that is. You heard it here, but that doesn't mean it's true. But it's a nice story, plays well. The wheels on this car started life as the beautiful, finned, sort of definitive Alpina style. They were originally 14-inch, if I remember correctly. These are 16-inch wheels with lower profile tyres to give the same rolling radius as the 14-inch wheels and tyres. Again, they improve the aesthetics of the car quite drastically and also make it handle better as well. One of the things with the rear suspension on these, it's the semi-trailing arm rear suspension. So the wheel angle is is fixed depending on the position of the suspension arm, i.e. whether the back's low or whether it's high. And the problem is, if you lift off mid-corner and the back of the car comes up as the weight transfers, the angle of the rear wheels, the contact patch on the road actually moves as well. And that can be the cause of some very interesting tail sliding. If in extremis, if you got it wrong, you could end up going through the scenery backwards, much like a Porsche 911. And the fact that you put lower profile tyres on it with a more unforgiving, shallow sidewall can actually make that worse. But I've always had a soft spot for these cars. I think they're wonderful. But the price, I'm just going to look at the prices for a moment, because this is very interesting. My trusty motor show review here, which I've come to refer to quite often. This is from 1972, when the BMW was launched. And to give you some idea of the price of this car, a Porsche 911 in late 1971 would cost you £4,049. That's for the 911 Lux, which was the base level one. Still a Porsche 911 though. BMW 3-litre CSL, £6,399. So this was, whatever that works out at, a huge percentage over a Porsche 911. And wonderful cars though they are, that's a lot of money. The rear spoiler was never fitted on them from the factory, a bit like the Lamborghini Countach. In period, BMW sold them if you wanted one in the boot, and you had to retrofit it yourself because they were illegal to be fitted on new cars because they weren't homologated, the rear spoiler, and BMW couldn't be bothered going through it. So you want one, you buy it, you bolt it on yourself. It's your responsibility. Same with Lamborghini Countachs. If you spec'd up a rear spoiler, if you spec'd that up from new, the car was pushed out of the factory to another shed, which was supposedly outside the factory's grounds, and there they bolted the spoiler on as an aftermarket part. So it was never fitted by the Lamborghini factory. There were all sorts of wonderful shenanigans going on in the 70s and 80s. I'm sure they continue. They're just behind closed doors more now. This car has been very, very nicely done. It's in super condition. But the problem is, as usual, people don't attribute the last percentage of a restoration time and cost to actually shakedown miles and setting the car up and making it drive as beautifully as it looks. This can account for anything up to 20% of the time of a restoration, is to drive the car, tune the engine, retune it, iron out any bugs, any rattles, squeaks, and then retest it again. And this can take, it's often overlooked, let's put it that way, in classic car restoration. Nothing against the people who have done the work on this car. It's a lovely job, but we're just going to put the icing on the cake. Problem with it at the moment is it's not pulling terribly well. It's flat, the engine, and it should be very fast. They were rated at 200 brake horsepower. At the time, they did around about 140 miles an hour, which was, in 1971, 72, that was serious speed. So I'll take it for a run, see what exactly it's doing and not doing. The owners complained of it being gutless, really. So I'll have a look at that. I'm sure there's nothing wrong internally with the engine, because to my ear, it does sound sweet already, but I'm sure we can make it sweeter and faster. So I give you the BMW 3-litre CSL. One of the other wonderful things about a lot of 1970s cars was what's called a pillarless construction. So you've got no B-post here to add strength or rigidity to the body shell. And actually, if you close the door quite hard on these, you can see this whole section of bodywork moving slightly. But anyway, a wonderful thing about 1970s cars was this pillarless construction. And to make the most of it, these rear windows actually disappear into the bodywork electrically. They hardly ever work properly, these rear window mechanisms, but this one does. You ready for this? How cool is that? And these were noted at the time for having slow electric windows. That actually is quicker than they were normally, so something's been done to that, I think. Maybe a relay has been introduced to the system. But isn't that just a work of art? It really is. Again, part of the lightweight construction, no B-post, as I say, and that means that you've got real open-air motoring when you put the electric drop glass down on the window. It gives a really good sensation. I happen to like pillarless cars, and I'm sure I'm not alone. This here is the Hofmeister kink, this styling cue which a lot of manufacturers have used. It became synonymous with BMWs for decades. This sort of styling trick here again, just to sort of resolve that join between the roof, the rear window, and the post there. It's a very clever sort of styling cue. But anyway, let's get the car on the road and see what's wrong with it. Well, let's see, before we do anything to it, let's see what the performance of this beast is like. It is warmed up now. Ooh. Ooh. That's not great. You can feel the potential, but these should absolutely fly. They should answer the throttle with that. This has got D-Jetronic fuel injection on it, the same as Mercedes had of this era, the injection cars, and it was a very expensive system, but because it wasn't tuned for fuel economy particularly, but correct fueling of the engine, not making it a bit lean mixture of petrol to air, all that means that this was a very responsive car when it's right. It's very responsive, and it should, you know, all those 200 brake horsepower should be present. I'll just get it on the straight again, but I'm sure there's some hidden horsepower here. I think the basics are okay, which is the important thing. We haven't done a cylinder leak down test on this car, but the engine is mechanically very sweet. I suspect it's things like ignition timing. I'm going to be having a look at that. Maybe the settings on the fuel injection, the mixture. Is the throttle opening all the way? That's the other thing. Now let's just try it again. It's pulling back very drastically. Yeah, I'm sure we can work some magic with this and find those lost horsepower. Very disappointing. This car should go, and it doesn't. So we like a challenge. It's all to play for. Well, as I've identified in videos previously, one of the blind spots with classic cars, with any car, is the throttle movement. If you floor the throttle in the car, you expect to have full power, but that isn't always the case, because the throttle linkage may not actually be opening the throttle or throttles all the way, and that's robbing you of horsepower. So the first thing I'm going to do, James is sat in the car making a sort of cameo appearance, so I'm going to ask him to floor the throttle as if he was driving the car. Just give it a good shove. That's it. Okay, now that should in theory be the throttle fully open. Look at that. All that. Is that foot still on the floor? Right, all that is lost motion. So that means the butterfly flap in here is opening to about there instead of there. There's probably 10 brake horsepower, 15 brake horsepower straight away without doing anything else, maybe 20. So we'll get the throttle linkage adjusted as part one of our checking. Well, I'm not very happy with the way this engine's running, actually. In spite of whatever else it's come in for, it's very tappety. There's a couple of tappets here need adjusting. One of them is that sort of plane there. I'll be looking for when the cover's off. I mean, I'll check them all. And there's another one there. So it's those two areas that have noisy tappets. Yeah, I think we can do better than that. I wasn't happy with the sound of the engine. It was just a little tappety. The tappets were too noisy. So I'm now going to explain how this works and what causes tappet noise. So the tappets are in between the camshaft and the valves in the engine. The camshaft has lobes on it which push the tappets, which open the valves and then release them again when the cam lobe spins round past its peak. So this is a single overhead camshaft engine. There's the cam, this is the drive wheel from the crankshaft, right the way along with your cam lobes under there. It's a single overhead cam cylinder head, as I say, but it's got hemispherical combustion chambers. So the valves are inclined like that inside here. There's one facing that way and there's one facing that way. And they have these rockers in the middle, which translate the point of the cam, depressing it, pushing it up, and that rocks on this shaft and pushes the valve down. It was used by BMW for many years, actually, and it works very well. The camshaft and followers, in particular, have to be of a very good quality, and they weren't always. There were companies in the UK that were selling replicas in the 1980s that were frankly made of chocolate. They were complete rubbish. They hadn't been hardened very deeply, etc. So you must go with original equipment or high quality parts. It's crucial, otherwise you end up with the top end of the engine that's knocking. As the camshafts start to develop flats on their lobes, on the points and things like that. But this here is an oil spray bar, which the Germans absolutely loved for decades. BMW used it on this engine, and it's got tiny little pinprick holes on the underside of this, which spray oil onto the cam lobes, which is great as long as you change the oil and filter regularly. If you don't, and you get little bit of carbon build-up, the jets can get blocked, and then the cam lobe and follower wear out in next to no time. Again, it's great when it works, and it's terrible when it doesn't. Porsche used this on the air-cooled 911s for decades, the spray bar system with rockers, almost the same as this, and Mercedes-Benz used it on their single overhead cam, the Pagoda, the Ponton, and other cars, the W114s. For years they used this system with the oil spray bar. The air filter is here, the air gets drawn into through the filter and then into the throttle here, which then goes into the inlet manifold, and you have the inlet ports or tracts. So these rockers on this side of the engine are the inlets, and this is the exhaust manifold here. These are the exhausts. I identified earlier that the noises were in that sort of plane, so we're looking at that sort of area, and I've got I've done a little bit of looking at this, and I've got some notes here. I haven't done the clearances on these valves. I've deliberately left them until we could film them, but to give you some idea, that's what happens when the clearances are just a tiny bit too large. I mean, the valve clearances on the inlet and exhaust cams are 0.25 millimeters, a quarter of a millimeter, but they are critical. I'm just touching that and moving it with my hand. If you've actually got the camshaft doing the work, it's 5 times as loud as that. And this cylinder head is aluminium, the block is cast iron. But aluminium is a wonderfully resonant material. It's like a bell. It rings. It's not dead acoustically. So any noise inside an engine like this, a cylinder head, is going to be amplified by the aluminium acting as an echo chamber, and also joining in with the fun sound-wise as well, actually amplifying the sound. That's one of the challenges facing modern engine designers. As the current internal combustion engines go, very few of them have cast iron blocks. They're all aluminium, and trying to keep the mechanical noise under control is a challenge. They do have hydraulic zero lash lifters for the valves, Tapets, which makes a big difference. But so that's one. That was the one I was hearing in that plane. That's too wide. And number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the inlet side, this I reckon is the one that's too loose there. They should have a bit of clearance, but I'm now going to adjust. So where are we? Number 3. So the feeler gauge, this is a 0.25 millimeter feeler gauge, and then we put that in between the top of the valve and the rocker. And as you can see, I can move that around. That's very easy to move that there. That's actually floating round there. So that tappet is too loose. That is not 0.25 millimeters. So what I do is just carefully back off the lock nut so that this little eccentric cam here is not trapped. It can actually revolve, and then I put that in there. There you go. That's actually taken up the clearance, and I can't move that very easily now. So that is the right clearance. So we'll just nip that up. No more than a nip. And there we have it. So what happens now is I can just about get the feeler gauge in there and no more. And you wouldn't believe the difference this can make. That will be absolutely, that's just difficult enough now to get the feeler gauge in. And then if we move to the other one, so in this plane I identified a noise here. Look how easily the gauge slides in and out. That's too wide, that tappet. Undo the nut. Tiniest of adjustments. There we go. That's it. And there we are. It's just caught in there and no more. And the noise is less. This will give you an extra 3 or 4 brake horsepower doing this, maybe 5. But what I'm also going to have a look at is the distributor. This is the rotor arm here, and what happens is as the revs build up in the engine, the combustion chamber, the combustion process still takes place, but it doesn't combust as fast as the speed of the engine increases. So in other words, in simple terms, it takes as long for the flame to propagate once the spark plug has ignited it, whether the engine's idling or doing high revs. So what you have to do at higher revs is anticipate when the spark is going to happen so that the flame can propagate and it can produce the downward force on the piston almost sooner in order for the flame to happen at the same time than it would do at low revs. I'm trying to explain this as simply as possible, but so what you need to do is advance the ignition timing at higher revs, and that's done in here with 2 little spring-loaded bob weights. And what happens is this is called the centrifugal advance. So as the revs rise, the spark actually happens sooner, essentially, but that should return to there, and it's not. It's stuck there. So that throws the ignition timing out, which means you're actually losing power there too, because the ignition is not advanced enough. Or if you adjust it there, it throws, with a strobe, it throws the timing out because it should be there. So you're losing power at high RPM. So what I'm going to do, there is a little felt pad in the middle of here. I'm going to put oil in there, which is a regular service function, and the oil actually runs down the shaft and lubricates the bob weights, the centrifugal advance mechanism, so that it restores the spring loading, pulling it all the way back to rest. So that again, that tiny little thing, costs us horsepower. So I'm going to finish setting all the tappets on this now. I've got my pad here, which I'm writing, as each valve clearance gets done, I tick it off to make sure that I don't do it twice. We'll put it all back together, and I think we'll sort this out, lube that up, and I think we're going to have a different car. I have also adjusted the throttle linkage so that the pedal actually actuates it all the way open. And these things combined are going to make this car fly. In order to demonstrate how this camshaft works and how it moves the rockers, I'm going to actually spin the engine over without the ignition system connected, just for a few cranks on the starter motor, so we can see the valve gear in operation. If the measure of a classic car, a high-performance classic car, is how special it feels, then this scores highly. There is such a sense of occasion driving this car. It really does feel special. It's amazing how taut it is, how responsive. I would go as far as to say, and I'm sure Porsche purists will throw their arms up in horror at this, but it actually feels very similarly planted to a contemporary 911. We have a most beautiful 911 in storage, a 1976, so not too different to this, which I did on a video ages ago, a lovely gold metallic 911 2.7 Lux. It was just lovely. Even a car of that age, when they're set up properly, are delightful. And this feels great. There's a little bit more play in the steering than I would be happy with, so I'm going to see if I can include that on the final tweaks. I didn't notice that as much last time, but it was a little while back. It's all about the performance. So now that it's warmed through, I'm going to drop it down a cog, and let's see if that BMW Straight 6 magic is there. Oh yes, immediate. Oh, that is so fast. For a 1970s car, it's electrifying. The torque, I mean, BMW managed to get big power out of relatively small engines, just with clever valve timing, combustion chamber design. They use that single overhead cam engine that they used for many years with followers over the top, opening the valves at an angle. Again, on the video on the CSI, I covered that, actually adjusting those, but when it's right, oof, these things are quick. And again, I would say the suspension on this, it's quite firm for a 1970s car. The suspension on 70s cars was nowhere near as firm as it is these days. That's why people got car sick in the 1970s, myself included, in the back of cars, because they were quite wallowy, easy for me to say. But this, it feels planted on the road. Yeah, the ride's a bit jiggly, he says, driving over a pothole, but it just feels absolutely right, this car. And this was from a time, or shortly afterwards, when BMW's advertising slogan was the ultimate driving machine. Yeah, I get that. It's all about the torque and the power. Let's give it another go. Oh. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It's very composed. This is a car you could drive on long trips and get out of. I mean, these bucket seats are probably the most bucketish bucket seats I have ever sat in. But of course, they were oh so cool in the 1970s. And the brakes on this are also very reassuring. It's a complex braking system. It takes a bit of bleeding out the system on this, because there are so many connections and master cylinders between the pedal and the calipers. But I would describe the engine as zingy. It's got that top end sort of, it's not a rattle, but it's a zingy noise. That's the best way I can describe it. This is so rapid. And those 16-inch wheels, again, the slightly lower profile tyres. It just comes on the cam at 3,500 RPM. It's never short of poke, this engine, but it just keeps building. It's BMW got the cam timing, in particular, the valve timing on this car, so right. I'll take it down to sort of 1,500 RPM. That's it there. And even then, the tail squats and the nose lifts, and it's oof. And the turn-in, I suspect, with those 16-inch wheels is actually rather more there than I remember having driven other CSIs and CSLs, but that ladlefuls of torque, it's just absolutely delicious, the power delivery. And it's a world apart from when the car came in. I'm sure our customer, who is a very knowledgeable carman and has a very interesting collection of cars in his own right, he's going to be delighted with this car. It's just fabulous. What a great car these were. No wonder they were so expensive. And the other thing about this is the beautifully slick gear change. It's got very little between the lever and the box, just two bushes which transmit the gear change, but so slick. It's like a switch, like a hair trigger on a rifle, just total precision. Yeah, this is still a very visceral and engaging car. It really is. No wonder it costs more than a Porsche 911 new, and this car is still worth more than quite a lot of Porsche 911s. To be vulgar for a moment, talk about money. This car, I think, is still very comfortably into 6 figures in pounds, value-wise. It really is a very special BMW. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, and we'll be back with something else very soon.